Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the opening panel of Civil Society Forum for the 64th session of the Commission for Social Development CSocD64. I am Lizo, International Director of the Center for Social Development at Washington University in St. Louis, and a member of the International Consortium for Social Development. I'm here to introduce the incredible lineup of speakers that the organizing committee put together for this opening panel. This panel is exciting for many reasons. It is a pivotal moment, 3 months into the era of Doha Political Declaration adopted by the world leaders at the Second World Summit for Social Development in Doha. To honor this, CSocD64's central theme is advancing social development and social justice through coordinated, equitable, and inclusive policies. This is a call for all of us to translate Doha's global promises into concrete and coordinated action. This panel launched the Civil Society Forum, a venue to share civil society's voices, lived experiences, and bold ideas. We began with thoughts from 4 distinguished leaders to set the strategic tone. We will hear from each of them for 5 minutes, then conclude with a brief summary. Now I'm honored to begin with a question for our first speaker, His Excellency Mr. Lok Bahadur Thapa, President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. President Thapa, the Doha Declaration calls on the UN system to enhance cooperation and support for implementing social development commitments. As the ECOSOC President, could you share your vision for how ECOSOC can strengthen UN system-wide coordination and provide strategic guidance to advance the social development agenda? To you, President.
Thank you, Excellencies, all the distinguished delegates, colleagues, and first of all, so happy to join you in these great discussions today. And as the moderator already highlighted that this year's the 64 sessions of the Commission for Social Development and reminded us that the incremental fixes and fragmented efforts will no longer suffice, and only bold, coordinated, and equity-driven policies across ministries, across sectors, and across all the levels of the governments can break the entrenched disparities and protect for this behind and deliver exclusive and fair outcomes. These are the efforts I think this civil society continuously and actively drives. And it's highlighted by the moderators, and we are meeting after 3 months of the Second World Summit on Social Development in Doha, and I think the summit was a pivotal moment in which all the member states reaffirmed the core pillars of the poverty eradications and full and productive employment and social integrations. Its outcome document provides a very clear way forward to meet the challenges for social development by 2030 and beyond. And on that, I think you can see that the commitments. I always say that commitment only matter if they change the realities. This is why you can see that as the president of the ECOSOC, my visions for the presidency is guided by the motto, delivering better. I think we now need to move from words to actions and driving accountability and then driving whole of the society approaches, elevating the social issues to the foundations of all development policy. We must work. Our work must be very practical. Our work must be very forward-looking. On this, I think this, the role of the civil society is indispensable and is the bridge between global advocacy and local outcomes. By fostering dialogue and then by driving actions, I think civil society, you can demand government accountability and ensure that policies are grounded in reality. And we fully realize that these efforts must be supported by global architectures that is fit for the purpose. In this context, I think Economic and Social Council has a very unique role to play. ECOSOC plays a coherent guidance to its subsidiary bodies and reinforces complementarities across mandates, across work programs and follow-up processes, including the follow-up to the Second World Summit on Social Development. And at the centerpiece of the ECOSOC work this year will be to lay the foundation for an effective follow-up of the Sevilla commitment, for example, because you can see that we are convening two special meetings on the financial integrity and credit ratings. And similarly, we are strengthening our political engagement with the Bretton Woods institutions in course of this follow-up of the Sevilla commitment. I think on this particular on social development and social justice, and I think this the CSocD is mainly responsible for this, and now we are also coordinating with the CSocD and the ECOSOC how we can really build the synergy and then how we can have the more engagement and collaborations in order to follow up all the commitments we have made in the Doha political declarations. I thank you again, and I'm so happy to see you all and to join in this great session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Thapa, for outlining ECOSOC's critical guiding role in advancing the social development agenda and your vision for system-wide coherence and support to member states provide an important framework for our collective work forward. Now we're honored to hear from our second speaker, Her Excellency Kristina Hayovishin, Permanent Representative of Ukraine to the United Nations and the Chair of the Bureau of CSocD64. Your Excellency, Madam Chair, Paragraph 3 of the Doha Declaration reaffirms that three core themes of social development are mutually reinforcing, and these themes are poverty eradication, full and productive decent work for all, and the social integrity. As Bureau Chair, could you share with us thoughts on how the Bureau can support member states in translating these three interlinked priorities, as well as the themes of CSocD64 into concrete policy at the national level? Please.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Moderator. And good morning, Mr. President, distinguished panelists, and distinguished representatives of civil society. It is a pleasure to see this room full again. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak at the Civil Society Forum. It is a real pleasure to be here with you, those who work closest to people and communities, and who remind us every day that social development is a matter of dignity, opportunity, and trust. This 64th session of the Commission for Social Development is particularly significant, as President of the ECOSOC mentioned. It is the first session following the Second World Summit for Social Development. It takes place at a moment when expectations are high, very high. We now stand at the beginning of a renewed global push to see the commitments made in Doha translated into real visible progress in people's lives across the world. What matters now is how we translate them into concrete action, that people can feel it in their everyday lives. At the summit, world leaders adopted the Doha Political Declaration, reaffirming the social development remains a cornerstone of sustainable development, peace, and social inclusion. They also reaffirmed that social development is central to our multilateral efforts. The declaration reflects that the urgent realities we all recognize, which include widening inequalities, persistent poverty, social exclusion, demographic shifts, wars, and the impacts of overlapping global crises. These realities are being felt in people's everyday lives. They demand more than reaffirmation. They demand coordinated, focused action, and this 64th session of the Commission for Social Development is exactly about that. CSocD64 is where we begin turning these global commitments into coordinated action. And our priority theme, which is advancing social development and social justice through coordinated, equitable, and inclusive policies, captures the essence of Doha's message that fragmented approaches can no longer meet the scale of complexity of today's challenges. So this is not a conceptual exercise. It goes directly to the question of how we deliver results to people. We must adopt a whole of government and whole of society strategies that place people, dignity, and inclusion at the heart of decision-making. Coordination is the bridge between ambition and impact. Without it, even the best intentioned policies fall short. And in all of this, civil society is not simply a stakeholder. You are an essential partner. Your advocacy, your proximity to communities, your commitment to justice, your ability to innovate, to push the governments, these are indispensable for achieving the objectives of World Social Summit. And civil society brings the realities of people's daily lives into the global conversations, global discussions. You work where policies meet people, and you help rebuild trust between institutions and communities. And you ensure that those most often left behind remained visible and heard. This year's session reflects that indispensable role, and we have a vibrant civil society presence and robust participation, which we highly welcome. The strong and diverse engagement we see here enriches the discussions. And as chair of this commission, let me stress that our work is just beginning towards achieving the Doha commitments. The ideas, recommendations, and partnerships that emerge from this forum will help shape national policies and influence global action well beyond this session. The success of this session will be measured not by the number of statements delivered, but by our collective ability to move from reaffirmation to implementation and to ensure that equity and inclusion shape both outcomes and decision-making. Civil society must continue to lead with courage, with creativity, and with conviction. Continue to challenge the governments, continue to innovate, and remind the governments what is at stake. And we need your advocacy to push the governments toward integrated, inclusive policies. We need your expertise to design solutions that respond to real-lived challenges. And we need your persistent, principled voice to keep social development at the top of the global agenda. Together, let us ensure that the ambitions of the World Social Summit become more than commitments. They must become real improvements in the lives of families, communities, and individuals around the world. I thank you for your participation and look forward to rich discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Madam Chair, for framing CSocD's themes and sharing the Bureau's vision for CSocD64 and how civil society can help deliver results to people. And this is inspirational guidance for our work ahead. Next, we will have the privilege of welcoming our third speaker, Ms. Bjork Sancher, the Assistant Secretary General for Policy Coordination of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Honorable ASG, you are one of the very few people who had the pleasure, were present at the Copenhagen Summit, the Doha Summit, and our current CSocD64. Woohoo! You might be the only one on this panel, actually. And you have witnessed the social development agenda evolution firsthand, and its unique continuity over 3 decades. So given your role, and what is your vision of how UN DESA can coordinate this UN-wide support to help member states and the civil society implement the Doha Program of Action. Please, ASG.
Thank you, Chair, for that wonderful introduction. And I'd like to thank the previous speakers for framing the discussion so well. And if you will allow me a personal reflection, thinking back to 1995 in Copenhagen, I was a young activist in the civil society space. So I'm looking at you now, I'm thinking that this is a great partnership to really move social development forward. And I do remember in 1995, global civil society coming together. And this was at a time when global civil society was really galvanizing around big UN processes, working to influence outcomes of UN decisions, and really shaping what has become the social development agenda. The outcome document of Copenhagen, you will remember, it really places 3 key themes on the agenda. We talked about poverty eradication, we talked about employment and decent work for all, and we talked about how can we create more inclusive societies. Civil society helped shape that outcome document and has therefore also helped shape very important developments and discussions that we've had since. Of course, that outcome also has influenced other thinking, including the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are some ideas that we may now take for granted. For example, when we talk about the importance of people-centered development. That was not a given in '95. We have made progress. And I think, now as we are looking at the world around us, we are following up great decisions that were also made in Doha. We tend to look at the challenges and the unsolved challenges and problems. And we should be doing that. That's our role. But at the same time, I think sometimes it is important to look back and look at the progress that we have made and learn from those important efforts, the alliances we built, and the way that we worked to create the progress that we want to see. Now, if we look at the Doha Political Declaration, I think it does provide that renewed global framework for action on poverty eradication, on decent livelihoods, on social inclusion, and on social justice. It calls very clearly for integrated policies, for stronger institutions and effective partnerships across government, across the UN system, and across society as a whole, with civil society as a key partner in doing that. And meeting here at CSocD, we have that opportunity to talk about, well, how are we going to translate those commitments into action, as we also heard from the distinguished panelists earlier today. Of course, civil society plays a very critical role in this follow-up. On the part of UN DESA, I was challenged to talk about how we will take it forward, so I'll spend the last bit of my time talking about our commitment to supporting this process. We, of course, will continue to work with member states, with civil society, with partners, to strengthen that coordination across the UN system, to support inclusive policy making, to ensure that the voices of those furthest behind are heard and acted upon. Very specifically, we will continue to provide the evidence and analytics that help inform the discussions that we are having. I hope you are all looking at DESA's website to find data, to find reports, to find analysis that can help inform this work. Second, toolkits and peer learning. This week's program of work has functioned as a set of practical labs. I hope you've taken a lot of lessons from that. We will help from DESA to distill those lessons, make them available, so that we can continue to work together to further the important social development agenda. Third, we will keep advising on financing facilitation. The president of ECOSOC mentioned the ongoing meetings this week on financial integrity. The important outcomes of the Financing for Development meeting that happened in Sevilla last year were brought into the Doha Declaration, and we do need to look at how we bring these agendas together and how we think about social development as an investment, not as an expense. And finally, we will continue to support accountability, to continue to support member states to identify and build national data capacities and systems to follow up and implement and review both in delivering on Copenhagen and Doha, and of course, in achieving our joint action plan, the Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you again for all your important efforts to advance social development, to advance social justice, and I look forward to working with all of you as we translate Doha and the commitments there into real change in people's lives and in communities and in societies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable ASG, for being the champion over 3 decades. You're the trailblazer. Thank you for outlining the UN concrete support available to member states and to civil society. These coordination mechanisms are an exciting platform for our collaborative work. Finally, let's welcome some words from our very own Ms. Gillian de Souza Nazareth, Chair of the UN NGO Committee on Social Development. Chairwoman de Souza Nazareth, paragraph 25 of the Doha Declaration recognized the impact of contributions of multi-stakeholder engagement to social development. Can you share with us your thoughts on specific actions that member states and the UN entities can take to enable civil society to effectively implement these Doha commitments? Please, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And good morning, Excellencies, Mr. President, and my colleagues on the floor. It is genuinely a pleasure to see so many of us in the room today. There is something quietly powerful about gathering in this space. These halls carry decades of debate, disagreement, and determination. They have witnessed moments of deep division and moments of shared resolve. Today, they hold us as civil society with both responsibility and hope. We meet today under the priority theme of CSocD64, advancing social development and social justice through coordinated, equitable, and inclusive policies. This sounds like very formal language, but at the heart, it asks a very human question. How do we make life fairer, safer, and more dignified for people everywhere? The Copenhagen Declaration, and thank you, Madam ASG, for being there, reminds us that social development is not a side issue. It's the foundation of peaceful and stable societies. Poverty eradication, decent work, social inclusion are not just development goals, they are peace-building choices. And these themes form the basis of today's forum. The Doha Declaration brought this message into the present moment. It tells us quite clearly what needs to be done. It gave us the tools in 16 globally agreed resolutions, declarations, and agreements. What we need now is coordination, inclusion, and most importantly, implementation. And so I was really happy to hear from all of our speakers here that implementation is on the agenda. And if we are honest, this is where civil society feels the tension the most sharply. The agreements are robust, the intentions are sincere, but often there is a gap between what is said in this room and people's lived realities. And therefore, we bring the ground truth here to the UN space. We work where policies land, on communities under pressure, care systems stretched thin, and where young people are seeking for opportunity. We also see what works and what could work better. And today's programming will bring together many such examples. To specifically answer your question, Madam Moderator, I'd like to get us started with 3 points. And I kind of feel that maybe I was somewhere reading the other speakers' remarks because it's nice to see that there is some overlap. So my first point was actually inclusion must be routine and not exceptional. Participation should not be just a procedural step, but a stabilizing force. And I share as an example the chair of our bureau, who has been so inclusive, so welcoming. Madam Chair, we had just 3 months after Doha to put this together. You found time to meet with us, to co-create with us, and definitely made us feel inclusive. For that, I am very grateful. I also share another example that when we were in Doha, Mr. President was there with us, and we had some struggles on stage trying to take a selfie, and it is thanks to his phone that we had the picture. And so this is really heartening to see that, civil society is not doing this alone. People, all of our stakeholders are helping. My second point is social protection and care systems are not just quiet anchors of peace. They may not make headlines, but it's what holds society together. When people feel protected, when care is valued, when systems respond, it's easier to ease tension and resilience grows. So I feel confident when I see this also in our emerging issues theme. And last but not least, hope needs follow-through. Declarations give us direction, implementation gives us confidence. And I swear, I have financing, data, and accountability as my points here. And so, ASG, when your remarks really floored me, because we feel confident that we're in safe hands and we can move this. Dear colleagues, we civil society always believe in multilateralism. We believe in dialogue, and we believe that social development and peace are not built in one grand moment, but through consistent, inclusive action. So I invite you to use this forum well. May we listen generously, speak plainly, and leave with a shared sense of progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman De Souza Nazareth, for articulating civil society's expectations and the important community-level insights that we bring to this process. So let me take a moment just to draw together the threads we have heard this morning. We have been reminded that ECOSOC stands ready to provide system-wide coordination and strategic guidance to support implementation. The CSocD64 theme is both urgent and actionable, requiring coordinated, equitable, and inclusive approaches at all levels. UN DESA offers concrete coordination and policy support to help us translate commitments into action. Civil society brings essential grassroots perspectives, advocacy capacity, and a commitment to ensure that social development remain at the heart of implementation. As we move into the forum's thematic sessions today, we carry forward this shared understanding that advancing social development requires all of us, member states, UN entities, and the civil society, working in close partnership. Thank you again to all our panelists, distinguished panelists, for setting such a strong foundation for our work at CSocD64. And thank all of you and our participants in the room and online for your commitment to advancing social development and justice for all. We look forward to seeing you throughout the forum. Thank you so much. Thank you.
it's on. Of course. Good morning. We are about to begin the first panel. And if I could ask everyone to please take their seats so we can give our speakers their due attention. Kindly take your seats.
Yeah, you gotta get them.
Oh, love it. Okay. If everybody would please take their seats, we will begin. Good morning. I am Mary Ann D'Antuono, main representative of the International Association of Charities to the UN and co-chair of the Advocacy Committee of NGO Social Development. It is my privilege to welcome you and to moderate this important panel. We hope to further our discussion of the principles of both Copenhagen and Doha with the title, Advancing Inclusive Pathways to Poverty Eradication, delivering on Copenhagen and Doha commitments. The 64th session of the Commission for Social Development has been animated with excitement following Doha. Doha was a pivotal moment, as was just mentioned in the opening session. And it led to a new generation of leaders taking up the call to end poverty. We know the problems and the scope. We even have some good programs that will improve the lives of people living in poverty or on the edge of poverty, like universal social protection systems and floors. These protect people in crisis and those who can for which opportunity does not exist. We know and have committed to multilateral, multi-sectoral cooperation to provide life cycle education, healthcare, and housing. Today, we will hear more ideas for solutions from both the UN perspective as well as the grassroots perspective. We had a great introduction in the opening panel, and we have a very qualified panel here and want to hear from them. So rather than hear from me, I will now turn this panel over to these esteemed speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Yusuf Aden Musa, counselor in the mission of the Republic of Djibouti to the United Nations, a good friend of NGO CSocD, strong supporter, and to the issue of homelessness. Mr. Musa.
Thank you, Marianne, for that generous and warm introduction. And thanks to all of you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, my delegation and I are very appreciative for the opportunity to participate to the annual Civil Society Forum held on the margins of the 64th session of the Commission for Social Development. It is the first Civil Society Forum convened at the United Nations since the adoption of the Doha Political Declaration last November. One cannot fail to notice that member states and civil society organizations, CSO, share the determination to accelerate implementation of the goals of this declaration consistent with the commitment of the Copenhagen Declaration. This determination is clearly reflected in concerns regarding particularly the likelihood that the 2030 Agenda and its SDGs will not be achieved by 2030 in most countries. Considering the crucial relevance of this matter, my delegation deemed it appropriate to convey its perspective on what is required to advance this commitment. 4 months after the Second World Summit on Social Development, we believe the current session of CSocD offers a gentle, almost whispered invitation for the consumers to discuss, explore, and voice their ideas, views, and concerns regarding the product, and particularly its delivery and implementation. It is clear that the consumers, namely the general membership of the United Nations and the CSO, have on repeated occasions expressed their views and concerns, particularly regarding the pace of implementation, which exposes a persistent gap between commitments and concrete actions. Like us, UN delegates, civil society representatives with many talented and highly experienced professionals to have a deep appreciation of the true benefits that social development policies can offer in our collective effort to addressing global social challenges. As seen, they are deeply committed to poverty eradication, full and productive employment for all, as well as social inclusion. More than any other platform, your voice and active participation are the best indicator of the centrality of social development to the United Nations multilateral system. I wish to thank all of you here for your strength, tireless efforts, and dedication in supporting global social development policies at the local, national, and regional level. Policies that are inclusive, equitable, and rooted in solidarity. Your energy and determination are essential to meeting the challenges the world faces in translating social development goals into real and tangible improvements in people's lives. Ladies and gentlemen, in Djibouti, social development has been a fulcrum of our economic development and has contributed to the achievement of strategic government objectives. Today, basic social services such as access to clean drinking water, essential healthcare services, and education reach the impoverished areas and most of the remote rural areas of our country, with tangible improvements in the livelihoods and enabling greater opportunities for Djiboutians of all walks of life. Furthermore, through the Ministry of National Solidarity and the National Agency for Social Development, our government took significant steps to strengthen its collaboration with national NGOs to foster progress in health, education, and nutrition across the country. Despite these efforts, sustained engagement remains vital to fully harness the potential of this collaboration and to reinforce the impact of social programs aimed at eradicating poverty in Djibouti. Moreover, as in many developing countries, poverty eradication is further constrained in Djibouti by a financing gap that cannot be overcome by domestic resources alone, and therefore calls for urgent and substantive international support. Ladies and gentlemen, in recent years, a range of targeted programs have been launched to combat poverty in Djibouti. These efforts address poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, through concrete actions such as support for income-generating activities, interest-free loans, cash transfers, and nutritional assistance. Together, these programs and interventions represent a significant step toward a sustainable national approach to poverty eradication. Microfinance programs, which provide loans to women, play a crucial role in tackling the feminization of poverty by empowering women economically. Combined, these actions promote entrepreneurship, strengthen small businesses, and contribute to building more resilient communities. Ladies and gentlemen, our effort to address poverty in all its dimensions and forms are grounded on strategies and frameworks that are inclusive and equitable, rooted in solidarity and in line with internationally agreed goals. Since 2008, these efforts have expanded the national coverage of social protection systems while also honoring our commitment to exchanges of experiences and lessons learned within our region. Over time and in practice, these ongoing efforts have clearly demonstrated the critical importance of coordination, capacity building, flexible and adaptive long-term planning, and adequate financing. In this regard, we would like also to underscore that a strong coordination remains a central pillar of effective, inclusive, and equitable social development policy. This brings me to the heart of our discussion, and as underscored in the Doha Political Declaration, it is crucial to move beyond the band-aid and temporary solutions and commit to the development of comprehensive strategies to integrate poverty eradication objectives into economic development policies. The development of an integrated policy framework should prioritize investment in social infrastructure, job creation, and human capital development. This requires enhanced coordination among education policies, healthcare, and social protection systems. Well-coordinated and long-term strategies are essential to effectively combat and to accelerate economic growth, enabling people living in vulnerable situations to break from poverty and to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Musa, and we appreciate the efforts that are being made both in Djibouti, but also here, and your role in supporting all of those efforts. It is now my pleasure to turn the podium over to Mr. Jonathan David Passamore, Counselor of Political Affairs in the mission of the Republic of South Africa to the United Nations. Mr. Passamore.
Thanks, Marianne, and thank you for the lovely and the honor and the privilege to be here. It's quite fun to be. I must first comment on the fact that this year's CSocD is tangibly different. There's this excitement. We feel the momentum. DESA has really done a great program, I have to admit. It's been fascinating, it's been stimulating. And so I think it's because it follows on from Doha. I think we're all feeling all reinvigorated by Doha. And that then it achieved its goals, first of all. But I was preparing a statement, something to say, and I worked diligently on the first draft. And I was getting everything right. I was hitting all the right notes. Poverty eradication in all its forms and dimensions. I was using the right language. I was feeling good. And then I spoke about the SDGs, and I spoke about Copenhagen, and then I thought, no, it felt too familiar. It felt the same. And I thought, let me go back to this. Let me figure out what I need to do, because we have to look at this from an implementation point of view. We have to look at what Copenhagen did and how Copenhagen led to Doha. It was a continuum. How does Copenhagen translate into Doha? And more importantly, why is it important? And then I thought, but then I have to look at how it translates at a national level into deliverables and implementation. My colleagues from Capital are here, and they were telling me, we're looking at Doha now and how we can finance it and implement it in. And I was like, what did I agree to? But I'm glad, because I went through it, I was like, yes, I agree to good things. So then I thought, let me do what all good diplomats should do. I went back to the text, and I whipped out my copy of the Copenhagen Declaration. I'm sure you've all got it in your bags with you. Yes. No, we all have it. We all carry it on with us at all times. And I looked at the text, and I said, okay, what is poverty eradication? The first thing you're going to look at is paragraph 5. Paragraph 5 places social development at the heart of the 3 pillars of the United Nations. This is a fundamental understanding. It says that the interests of people sit at the interests of the United Nations, and this is important. So it's the rationale that first comes in. Paragraph 6 is the first mention of poverty. Well, it uses 1995 language. It speaks about equitable social development, recognizes that empowering the poor, not delivering to the poor, empowering the poor, means that they must utilize resources. So now we've got the three dimensions of social development coming through. Sorry, of sustainable development, too many S's. And then finally, paragraph 7, it speaks about, and this I thought was so very relevant to this year's CSocD. It says, the most productive policies and investments are those that empower people to maximize their capacities, resources, and opportunities. And so I thought, well, it's always annoying when those before us actually thought of the things we're not so smart as we think we are, because that's exactly what this CSocD is about. Copenhagen highlighted it. So then I went to Commitment 2, which is the poverty eradication commitment on Copenhagen. Commitment 2 essentially just highlights all the actionable areas. It says everything's cross-cutting. If you want to eradicate poverty, if you want to achieve this, you've got to work on education. You've got to have universal health, social protection. You've got to have universal health coverage. You've got to have all these things because it all collectively forms part of the ecosystem that will form social development. And we know that poverty eradication is at the heart of social development. It's one of the 3 pillars. So then I thought, okay, so Copenhagen does that. The question is, what did Doha do? Did we repeat Copenhagen in Doha? Yes and no. The first paragraph on the paragraph that, I remember this, the first paragraph that we did, we negotiated on the poverty section. Oh dear, 1 minute left. That's not enough time. The first paragraph in Doha speaks about the very things that commitment to do. It's almost, it's not a verbatim, but it's a mirror of it. But then Doha goes further. You could see it's building on F54. It's building on last year's Sevilla commitment. It's building in there. We've talking about international cooperation to help poverty eradication. We're talking about multi-dimensional poverty measurement data. There's data. So there's a lot more detail coming through in Doha. And the importance of, there's a strong call for integration of social protection floors that comes through in Doha, which is fantastic. And so what does Doha do? It creates actionable areas that were clearly articulated in Doha that give modern expression to the commitments we upheld in Copenhagen. So we've taken Copenhagen and we said the world's changed, but it hasn't changed so much that the principles of Copenhagen aren't true. All we need to do is to give it modern expression. And that's what we've done in Doha. I've got an N sign, but I have to do a South Africa plug. I hope you don't mind. So what are we doing in South Africa? What we do is South Africa has, it's interesting, our constitution was written in the same time Copenhagen was drafted. And so, strangely enough, universal social protection is written into our constitution in a way. It feels, though, that there was a spirit of connectivity on that. And so what we have, again, is that mirroring at a national level, I feel, that Copenhagen set the principles, and that's written into our constitution of social protection, education for all, health coverage for all. And what's coming now is, last year, we've developed our medium-term development plan, where we've got the Doha echoes into it. Where in our medium-term development plan, we talk about the fact that public investment has to be absolutely strengthened in universal social protection and employment creation. It's just an indication of saying, okay, well, we've still got to go some way to do it, and we need to modernize what we committed to and entrenched into the highest authority in our land, the Constitution. So just some thoughts as to how poverty eradication still remains the central pivot, but there must be this continuation. We said what we want, the principles of what we want to do. We committed to things in Doha and in Copenhagen, and we articulated how we're going to do it now in Doha. And we hope that our countries are able to take those plans and say, we're going to do that. So I thank you, and sorry for running over.
It's quite all right. We appreciated not only your enthusiasm, but your historical perspective, and the commitment of South Africa to implementing these principles and these practices and these ways of solving poverty. You know, 30 years is a long time when you're poor, so it's really a good idea if member states really begin to move the agenda forward. And we certainly will be there with you, moving it forward, as you know. Okay, thank you. I'd like to now turn it over to Masumi Ono, Chief of Social Inclusion and Participation Branch of UN DESA, a very important part of the work of civil society here.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It's so wonderful to see so many of you again after our time together in Doha. I will stick to my prepared remarks because I want to use my time to highlight 4 key levers that can move us further towards social inclusion and poverty eradication, grounded in the work being delivered by my team in DESA. First, investing in long-term care is a strategic investment in poverty reduction. Inclusive, well-financed care systems protect older persons from falling into poverty and strengthen their dignity, independence, and well-being. Affordable long-term and community-based care also unlock economic opportunity. It enables more women to participate in the workforce and creates pathways for informal to formal employment, lifting families out of poverty and strengthening economies. age-friendly environments through accessible transport, digital inclusion, lifelong learning, and opportunities for continued engagement can combat isolation and ageism, strengthen intergenerational solidarity, and create a foundation for inclusive societies. When paired with strong social protection and universal health coverage, long-term care policies become a driver of more resilient, inclusive communities where every generation can thrive. For more on under-prioritized areas in long-term care policies, please refer to the call to action by the Interagency Group on Aging available on our website. Next, persons with disabilities and their households remain far more likely to live in poverty and to be excluded from employment. They have greater healthcare needs, yet face physical, financial, attitudinal, and informational barriers to accessing services. Many are still left out of emergency and crisis responses. Disability inclusion must be mainstreamed across national poverty reduction strategies. Public policies must be assessed to ensure they address additional costs of assistive technology and genuinely strengthen financial security. Accessibility must be guaranteed throughout the social protection delivery chain, and a two-pronged approach of universal and disability-specific measures is essential to enable real inclusion and equity. For more data regarding poverty eradication and persons with disabilities, please see the Disability and Development Report 2024, a UN flagship report available on our website. Now, promoting social inclusion and holistic people-centered approaches requires recognizing families as central enablers of social cohesion, care, and community resilience. Policies must reflect diverse cultural, political, and social contexts while supporting the needs of families and each of their members. Many countries have expanded social protection programs that involve families directly in planning and service delivery, yet gaps remain. We must do more to empower families, reach the most marginalized, and develop integrated long-term strategies that break the intergenerational cycle of poverty, giving every generation the chance to thrive. For the upcoming International Day of Families in May, we will be looking into the issue of inequalities in family context, as they have a great impact on the achievement of many SDGs, including poverty eradication. Finally, poverty and deprivation can have significant implications for young people's mental health and well-being. When families face financial strain or lack stable housing, access to nutritious food, or essential services, young people often experience heightened stress and uncertainty. While the extent of the impact varies, the evidence shows that material hardship can influence the mental health of adolescents and young adults. Uneven access to quality education, employment opportunities, health and social services, and social protection can create gaps in the support available to young people. Those who encounter discrimination, social exclusion, or the effects of conflict, displacement, or climate-related risks may face additional pressures. Improving youth mental health requires addressing the underlying social and economic conditions that contribute to these disparities. Efforts that promote inclusion and ensure fair access to opportunities are an important part of this approach. The World Youth Report launched this week underscores the value of viewing youth mental health within its broader social context and highlights the importance of investing in prevention, strengthening inclusion, and ensuring that young people can participate meaningfully in the policy-making processes that affect their lives. In closing, poverty, hunger, and structural inequality are interconnected challenges that require a multidimensional approach to policymaking. Partnering with civil society organizations at global, regional, national, and local levels is essential for overcoming structural barriers perpetuating poverty. We need a transformational shift toward more inclusive and sustainable development, where stakeholders help inform how social investments are designed, delivered, and scaled up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your naming the groups that really need be included as we move forward. The people who are caregivers and those who need care, families, aging, youth, and people with disabilities. Historically, many of them have not been included in plans for social development. So we appreciate that, and I'm sure that will generate more questions as we move forward. Thank you. And now the final panelist for this morning is Marianne Broxton from ATD Fourth World. And it's amazing to have two people on a panel with the name Mary Ann, and we both spell it the same way. But we've been colleagues in the Committee for Social Development for a while, and she's a wonderful, wonderful example of how we can change the world. So, Mary Ann.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for that very kind and sweet introduction, and for the opportunity here to address the forum today. So, Mary Ann introduced me as a representative from AT Fourth World, but today I don't want to speak to you as a representative to the UN from an international NGO, but as a person with the direct experience of poverty, because this is personal. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what the experience of childhood homelessness feels like. I know what it feels like to depend on inadequate, underfunded, and failing social protective systems for support, and the desperation and fear that can cause. And I have many friends who are still struggling in poverty. But having shared that with you, please don't misconstrue or discount my remarks here today as purely emotionally biased. So I want to start by laying out some statistics as cited in the Doha Political Declaration so we can have a sense of the reality that we face going forward. Inequality has reached staggering levels with over 1 billion people enduring poverty in different forms and dimensions. While millions have been lifted out of poverty, billions, with a B, of people live close to poverty line and face a constant risk of falling into extreme poverty. Billions of people make their living in the informal economy, and progress towards ending child labor is too slow. Almost 4 billion people still lack access to any form of social protection, including nearly 2 billion children. 1/3 of the world's population remains food insecure, with global undernourishment rising in recent years. Consistently, it has been women, girls, children, elderly, and the disabled that fare worse in every category of progress that is made so far. And achieving the Sustainable Development Goals has been too slow, with some goals stalled or regressing. So I'm sorry I'm a little depressing here. I just want to have us all to have a sense of reality that we face. We know poverty is a leading risk factor for death, acting as underlying causes for disease, malnutrition, limited access to health care, lack of sanitation, lack of clean drinking water, and a multitude of other factors. According to UNICEF data, in 2023 alone, roughly 13,100 children under 5 in poverty died every single day. Even in developed, rich, high-income countries like the United States, long-term poverty is considered the 4th leading cause of death, resulting in up to 295,000 deaths annually, according to a 2023 report by the University of California, Riverside. It's been 30 years since the Copenhagen Declaration. Due to the numerous varying factors, all of which are mitigatable, all which can be resolved, the number of people who died from poverty in the time span waiting for the promise of the Copenhagen Declaration to be kept is incalculable. But even trying to comprehend such an amount is unbearable. Although I appreciate the aspirations set forth in the Doha Declaration, accountability is only mentioned once in the document, on page 5. Every day, people in poverty wake up and are held accountable to their families, to their children, and to their communities, while at the same time being held personally accountable for their level of poverty by policymakers, institutions, and society alike. U.S. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley has stated, the people closest to the pain should be closest to the power, driving and informing policymaking. As we look to place people at the center of development, We also must look to people experiencing poverty as equal, proactive partners alongside member states, institutions, civil society, and private sector partners, because policy based on partial knowledge will never be fully effective. The experiential knowledge and insight of people with the direct experience of poverty is a valuable asset that we cannot let go to waste. We have less than 4 years to achieve the SDGs. There can be no excuses. We can do big things. We can prevent another 20 million children from dying due to poverty before their 5th birthday. I want to conclude this with the call to action. As civil society, it is our job to speak truth to power. It is our responsibility to ensure the people closest to the pain should be the closest to power, driving and informing policy making. And it is our duty to demand accountability. So thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Marianne. And I think your perspective is very warranted in this room, in which many of the civil society advocates would agree with what you're saying. And poverty means death for so many. It is not a luxury to work on these programs. It is an essential part of what governments must do, what we must do, and it should be the first priority as we move forward from Doha. Thank you. Okay, we can now move to invite your questions for this panel and statements which we have a few minutes for. So let me see if we can begin, and we'll take 2 and then we'll answer some questions, okay? So are we ready? The interventions from the floor? Yeah, okay, thank you. Anybody else have one? 2? Okay, 3. All right, so let me start over here. Would you please introduce yourself and begin and end with a question?
Excellencies, UN officials, esteemed delegates, friends and colleagues, my name is Michelle Loisel, main representative for the Daughters of Charity International at the United Nations. We are a 400-year organization of consecrated women working against poverty. We are also a founding member of the working group at the UN to end homelessness with several other groups. The Daughters of Charity approach to homelessness is grounded in a very simple conviction. Every person has dignity, regardless of their living situation. Homelessness is not seen as an individual failure, but as the result of a combination of social, economic, and structural factors, such as lack of affordable housing, unemployment, forced migration, family breakdown, conflict and violence, and insufficient social protection. When we encounter people living on the street, we discover not statistics, but persons, women and men who carry wounds, resilience, and hope. This encounter obliges us to move beyond charity toward assistance that organizes itself, influences structure, and transforms systems. Across very different culture and national contexts, our work with homeless persons seeks not only to meet basic needs, but also to restore confidence, autonomy, and a sense of belonging, and to contribute to more just and inclusive societies. Homelessness is often described as a housing problem. In reality, it is a systemic failure. If we do not see homelessness as an egregious form of poverty, we are leaving behind over 300 million people who lack a home and over 1/3 of the world's population who lack adequate housing. Homelessness can be solved. Today's panel invites us to do more than discuss homelessness. It invites us to see it, to hear it and to act, determining what it must be done, personally and collectively, so that in our world, so many lives are not lived without a home. Seeing it requires member states to use methodologies to collect disaggregated data. Hearing it requires all parties to listen to the people experiencing homelessness in developing and evaluating policy and programs, and to act determining what must be done. We must summon the political to put people at the center of development and social justice at its heart by acting on the Doha Declaration and other commitments of the United Nations. And thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
have a question now.
Yeah, do you have a question for the panel? Thank you.
A quick question. Based on your experience and what I heard this morning, what is one concrete practice that policymakers should prioritize if they truly want to place human dignity at the center of responses to homelessness and vulnerability?
Thank you. I think we'll take another intervention and then we'll ask the panel to respond. Okay, I think there was another one over here. Randita?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Nandita Pantone. I represent the Inclusivity Project, including the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Descent, as well as Ambedkar International Mission USA. The key question I wish to discuss is how the commitments of Doha Political Declaration are translated into country-level action for those who have been systematically excluded. At the center of this challenge is social protection. As recognized in the Doha Declaration, nearly 4 billion people worldwide still lack access to any form of social protection, including almost 2 billion children. The Seville FFD4 outcome calling for annual increase in coverage is indeed important step forward. However, coverage alone is not enough. What matters is whether social protection systems are designed to identify and dismantle the structural barriers that prevent many marginalized communities from accessing them. Discrimination based on work and descent, often rooted in social stratification, is a key driver of the multidimensional poverty. More than 270 million people globally belong to the communities affected by this form of discrimination. Across regions, they face restricted access to education, decent work, essential services, and social protection due to stigma, informality, lack of documentation, and discriminatory delivery systems. Women and girls experience compounded exclusion. As highlighted in the recent policy brief by UN Women, women and girls from communities discriminated on work and descent face intersecting inequalities related to gender, social status, informality, and unpaid care work, leaving them disproportionately excluded from the income security and social protection. For social protection systems to fulfill the promise of Doha, they must be universal, inclusive, and evidence-based. This requires deliberate government action, identifying where structural forms of discrimination exist using disaggregated data and multidimensional poverty measures, and designing targeted responses within the universal system aligned with social protection flows. This also requires inclusive multi-stakeholder collaboration. For example, I wish to mention the work of African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which the esteemed speaker also mentioned, which recently passed a resolution on the need to identify, study, and address discrimination based on work and descent. This effort has shaped through close engagement with civil society, whose contribution of evidence and advocacy helped align recognition, identification, and policy action through partnership amongst governments, regional bodies, and civil society. So, Honorable Chair, I think the civil society stands ready, and we call upon the member states and other stakeholders to work in partnership. Together, we can ensure social protection reforms deliver equitably across those who are left most behind.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I would like to ask the panel if they have any insight or advice as to how structural barriers can be identified and dismantled so that social protection can be more inclusive and accessible to the affected communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And I open this up to the panel. Would anyone like to respond? Okay, Jonathan and then Yusuf. Okay, Jonathan and then Yusuf.
I'll take a risky wade in on the question on what one policy intervention could be taken to address poverty. On the structural barriers, there are options, but I think civil society is best to answer that because we should listen to civil society more on those things.
You can always be a leader.
But on the policy interventions, I'm probably going to get myself into trouble for this, but spend more money on people and less on guns. You know, and South Africa's trying to lead the charge on this a little bit. I was just going through our stats. We'll be projected to be spending about 50 to 60% of our national budget on social protection, education and health over the next few years. And we spend about, I don't know, what's it, 60 billion on like about 3%. No, not even, less than 1% on defense. So we're trying, you have to spend well on it, but the reality is there's not enough resources allocated to people, and you said it in your intervention, people-centered budget allocation. The problem is also poverty is also expressed at a global scale, at a macro level, where you have very wealthy countries and very poor countries, and that gap is not getting smaller, and the poor countries are expected and need to have increased expenditure. The resources are just not there for us. Thanks.
Non, merci Marianne, et surtout si l'on revient.
Thank you very much for the question. I wanted to come back to the question that was asked about homelessness. Djibouti, with Algeria, Senegal, and Madagascar, has been working on this issue in the African group. We put forward a resolution which has become a biannual resolution. And I think we will continue to engage with the Secretariat on this issue because we have some very striking statistics on homelessness in developed countries. And we've also seen that there are significant data gaps in countries in the global south as well. But just to go into this issue a bit further, I'd like just to make 3 comments on the current policy to combat poverty. As you know, this started really in the 1990s, where we saw that there was economic growth without development necessarily going hand in hand with that. And that's when there were really discussions about how economic growth could go necessarily hand in hand with development. And this then led in 2005 to the establishment of the multidimensional poverty index. And one of the architects of that was actually here. And they carried out an analysis based on 3 parameters: health, education, and living standards. And that includes housing, including also food and access to drinking water, and so on and so forth. So that made it quite easy to calculate. And then since then, this was all fleshed out in the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda and also the Doha Summit. And that's when we've seen the appearance of this new cost paradigm, the issue of this new concept that has been mentioned, which includes sustainable development within these development calculations. Because, of course, food and drinking water can be provided, but it ultimately has to be provided sustainably if it is to be something that is genuinely successful over time. It's very important that it's not just civil society organizations who are working on these issues. There are many solutions that can be found within the UN. In addition to talking about sustainable development, we also need to look at the environmental dimension of all these issues. We can't go beyond the limits that the planet offers. I'll leave it at that, but I thank you very much for that very interesting question.
Thank you. I think, Marianne, you have a comment quickly? Because I
Yes.
think we have a couple more and we're starting to run out of
Very
time.
quickly. Housing, always housing first, because housing affects mental health, physical health, relates to being able to have employment, your children in school, and the bureaucratic documents and the recertifying to try to get shelter, consistently proving your level of poverty to be able to qualify for shelter or housing. Make it as easy as possible. Always housing first. Structural barriers, legal identity needs to be universal and free for birth certificates and for people, for adults, because you cannot apply for a bank account, you cannot apply for a subsidy, you cannot apply for housing without a legal birth certificate and education. So those two recommendations, always housing first with no strings attached, and legal identity to be able to overcome structural barriers.
Thank you. I believe I had another intervention over here.
Speak on behalf of Make Mothers Matter, an international NGO representing 10 million mothers around the world. Excellencies, colleagues, across the world, women and girls continue to shoulder the majority of unpaid care and domestic work. This unequal distribution comes at a high cost to their health, education, professional opportunities, and financial independence, particularly for mothers. It remains a root cause of gender inequality and a major barrier to social development. Although unpaid care work is essential to sustaining families, communities, and economies, it remains largely invisible and undervalued. Because it is unpaid or underpaid, care work is also perceived as unskilled. This perception is deeply flawed. Care work, particularly unpaid family care, such as parenting, builds a wide range of transferable skills that are highly relevant to today's labor markets and to the complex challenges our societies face. These include organization and time management, problem solving, communication, emotional intelligence, adaptability, stress management, and leadership. Recognizing unpaid care work as real, productive, and skill-building work is a critical step toward properly valuing this essential contribution with far-reaching implications for social development. First, for human capital development, recognizing care-related skills strengthens self-confidence, well-being, and social participation. It enables training and employment programs to build on existing competencies rather than assuming a skills deficit. Second, for gender equality, because women perform most unpaid care work, recognizing these skills helps challenge the idea that care is natural or unskilled women's work. It supports women's access to or re-entry into the labor market and encourages a more equal sharing of care responsibilities. Third, recognizing unpaid care work as productive legitimizes public investments in caregivers, including paid family leave, care allowances, pension credits, affordable child care and elder care services, and systems to recognize informal skills. Such investments strengthen social infrastructure, reduce poverty, and support demographic resilience. To conclude, recognizing care-related skills helps acknowledge unpaid care work as vital, valuable, and skilled work that underpins our societies. Thank you. And I have a question. Yeah. How can we amplify this contribution to alleviate poverty and contribute to a virtuous circle for gender equality, social justice, and social development, and to a vision of care society set out in the 2022 Buenos Aires commitment? Thank you.
Okay. I think I have one more back here that I came up before. Go ahead.
Thank you, Excellencies, civil society leaders, and esteemed colleagues. My name is Roland Knight. I'm here representing Good Shepherd Services and will be speaking on how education can be a solution for poverty. Nelson Mandela once said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." How fitting this quote is. As job opportunities become more limited and requirements become more rigid, education will change the world for many and at the very least level the playing field. This extends itself from the classroom to hands-on and virtual training. In programs I supervise, we work hand-in-hand with New York City public schools. This collaborative approach ensures students are receiving the best education possible by addressing the students holistically. How can a child receive the best education if they can't get to school? How can they receive the best education if they don't have the technology? How can they get the best education if they aren't fed and are hungry? If their sleeping arrangements aren't conducive for a restful night? To answer these questions, you must think about it from a shrimp-based perspective, not from a lack of, but when an abundance of. When educated, you are equipped with skills and credentials that potentially lead to higher pay and stability of jobs. In turn, this allows you to provide proper shelter, gain access to healthy food, support resources, and adequate transportation. Education allows you to have more outlets and opportunities. How amazing it feels when you're working somewhere you want to be rather than you have to be. Many people who are in poverty aren't there by choice. It's not something they wake up and said, "I want to be poor during my lifetime." In fact, it's a systemic issue that becomes generational. Those marginalized are affected the most. This is why the work we do here at Good Shepherd Services is so essential. We see what can be in the communities we serve, choosing to go where most won't, and helping those underserved by providing quality programming. In this case, an emphasis on supported education through our partnerships.
I'm going to have to ask you for a question. We're running out of time.
My question to the panel is, how can we ensure education is accessible and affordable to everyone on a micro and global level?
Thank you. I think I will turn to this side of the panel first, and if we could be brief in our responses, because our panel is about to conclude. So, Masumi? Yeah.
Yes, no, thank you very much. I would just like to address the question of how do we make social protection more inclusive, and I would say protect physical space, ensure access for all generations and those in vulnerable situations, data disaggregation, which somebody mentioned, and gender-responsive, family-supportive policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Marianne?
Question 2, when we talk about, question 3, about care and unpaid care work, I'll say these words: universal basic income. All work is valuable and deserves to be paid. Raising children is hard. Caring for an elderly parent is hard. People deserve to be paid to the work that they do and to be able to provide for that family member. So universal basic income for caregivers.
Thank you. Do you have anything you want to add? Last words?
I'll try to speak to the care. It's a debate we have often. Beijing told us to measure care, and we've never developed a measurement for care. And I must admit, the panel, was it yesterday, was the first time we started to look at data that we can use to measure unpaid care and support, and that was time-based data. We need to measure care and support work. We need to understand what its contribution it is to the economy, because it's not a monetary contribution. We can never measure. Yeah. So I think we need to figure out how to measure it. And then on the education thing, on universal access, same thing. States must spend on education, and we try and spend Yusuf might speak to something more important on addressing inequalities in education. We have inequalities both at a national level and at an international level. The education a learner will receive in the global north, in the developed world, is different to the education a learner will receive in the south, in the developing world. I often say, you know, in the developed world, they're thinking about how to get computers to their learners. In the developing world, we're thinking on how to put a classroom up. The gap needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. You have anything else?
Yeah, I just want to go back to this question of how we can solve this problem of lack of access to education, particularly in Africa. So the only, solution that has been so far available in our work, particularly at the United Nations and in negotiations, was to increase the level of international support, and that this support must be appropriate or adequate to the situation on the ground. You don't have really to build something that is extremely extraordinary, but at least something that can help them to navigate the situation they are in, particularly in the context of Africa, where the rate of poverty and unemployment of youth is extremely high compared to other regions of the world. And another final thought is that education is, as I recalled earlier, the second factor of the multi-dimensional poverty index. So you have health, and then education, and then you have the standard of living. So you see the importance of this pillar of education. So we will continue to work, and thank you, Marianne.
And I want to thank our panel here. Obviously, what I said in the beginning, that Doha has generated more excitement, more energy, and really animated our conversations around the topic of poverty eradication. We know there are solutions. And I want to thank our panelists for all they've contributed this morning. We will, as I often say, the UN kind of takes a satellite view. Civil society, we've got the street view. We need to stand together on common ground for the common good. So 5 years from now, we'll be reporting on progress, and hopefully not as much left to be done to eradicate poverty in our world. So let's cooperate, let's collaborate, and let's get it done, okay? If we want peace, and I think that's the point of this all, we must work for social justice, social development, with people at the center, protecting human dignity and human rights. So I thank you all for being here, and I turn this over to panel 2.
there, everyone. We'll be starting the panel. Please, can you take your seats so we can be on time as well? Thank you, Albert. All right. Their Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, partners, and friends, good morning to those present in this room, and warm greetings to everyone joining across regions. Being here today is a privilege, one we must honor, not only by your presence, but by your action, acknowledging the grassroots champion worldwide who should be seated in this same room and whose daily work gives meaning to our discussions. It's my honor to moderate this session of the Civil Society Forum 2026 on decent work as a foundation for social inclusion and cohesive societies, policy pathways, and community-driven action, delivering on Copenhagen and Doha commitments. It is also my true privilege to be surrounded by such committed and aspiring panelists whose experience bridge policy and practice, institutions, and communities. 30 years ago, the Copenhagen Declaration articulated a clear vision, a society for all. Grounded in participation, non-discrimination, and full employment, it affirmed that a full and productive employment and decent work are pillars of social integration and sustainable development. The Doha Political Declaration builds on that foundation. In paragraph 3, it affirms that poverty eradication, full and productive employment, decent work for all, and social integration are mutually reinforcing. Paragraph 30 advances this commitment, calling for inclusive growth, decent job creation, the transition from informality to formality, and the protection of fundamental principles and rights at work. The message is coherent and consistent. Decent work is not only an economic objective, it is a structural foundation for social inclusion. If Copenhagen articulated the vision and Doha renewed the commitment, then implementation is our shared responsibility. And our focus today is therefore not only on reaffirming commitment, but on implementing them. Implementing means measurable, decent job pathways. It means inclusive labor institutions that leave no one behind. It means scaling community-driven models so that what works locally informs national and global action. Today, let's discover concretely how decent work becomes not only a principle we reaffirm, but a reality we advance, and a true foundation for inclusive and cohesive societies. Similar to the previous event, we'll hear first from our distinguished panelists, followed by an interactive section with intervention from the floor. I now invite our dear Ms. Cynthia Olojuwon-Samuel, Special International Labour Organization representative to the United Nations, to take the floor.
Thank you so very much, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, old friends, new friends. I can see some of my new friends that I met during the course of the week. Really wonderful to be here. And I must acknowledge and congratulate the focus of this session, the theme. And it is decent work as a foundation for social inclusion and cohesive societies. And the moderator already set the stage beautifully. But permit me to go a little beyond that, to say that decent work is actually the foundation for shared wealth creation. And the Doha Political Declaration reaffirms the importance of decent work in full and productive employment, not only for social development, but for an inclusive and sustainable social development. And permit me to go a step further and link it with the acceleration of the SDGs, as was recognized by the UN SDG, that there are 6 transitions that can turbocharge the implementation of all the SDGs. And guess which is one of these 6 transitions? Jobs and social protection. So again, kudos to the team for putting this emphasis on this, and I will continue to work with you, not just at the global level, but at all levels, to see that the conversation is active, but it's also focused on implementation. I'll highlight 3 things. The first is that multilateralism delivers. It is not true that multilateralism has not delivered or does not deliver. And within the ambit of decent work, permit me to highlight a couple of things. In the time between Copenhagen and Doha, child labor has been reduced from 20% to 8%. Extreme poverty has fallen from 39% to 10%. For the first time in the history of mankind, more than half of the world's population is covered by social protection. Is this enough? Absolutely not. But has there been progress? You bet there has been. And it's important that we acknowledge it. We now have the Doha Political Declaration. And the essence of the Doha Political Declaration is to see how we move the needle faster and further. And to show that we really need to move the needle faster and further, a significant majority of workers are in the informal economy. And they have limited access to the kind of protection that they should have. And this is about 2.1 billion. And most of them are young people, most of them are women, including in the care economy. Around 260 million young people are not in education, they're not in employment, they're not in training. That's a significant challenge that we have to deal with. Again, women continue to face barriers, and persons with disabilities continue to have significant challenges. The demographic divide, the demographic transition in terms of the older people has its implications also for labor market participation. And when we look at environment and we look at the digital transitions added to the demographic transitions, we do have challenges. But the beautiful thing is we know what works. So that's the first one. The second, and I go back to the Doha Political Declaration, and really the civil society has a lot to celebrate, that we were able to have this document adopted by consensus in an era where agreeing on things has been difficult. And this declaration identifies key priorities that we need to collaborate with key stakeholders, including social partners, the civil society. Among these are ensuring that macroeconomic policies promote decent work, living wages, transition to formality, the importance of high levels of productivity, increased investments in structural transformation, and addressing the issues of youth unemployment. The third and the last point is that what we're hearing during this session of CSocD is really encouraging, because we're having that multidimensional way of looking at the problem of social development. In the fact that we have a lot of ministers and representation from the ministries of labor, the ministries for social development, and other ministries coming together, it shows that we're going beyond talk on coordination, we're walking coordination. But are we there already? No, more needs to be done. And in this regard, the whole of society, whole of government approach is so, so crucial. So, so crucial. And I'm really pleased that we have the trade unions with us, civil society, working with governments across different ministries and sectors, having business also with us. This is the beginning of really working coordinatedly here in New York and making sure that we bridge the divide between Geneva and New York in making sure that the agenda is not only owned, but that we work together. And in this regard, social dialogue is particularly crucial. And working with the institutions that have the mandate or that have been set up to bring together key stakeholders, like the Global Coalition for Social Justice, is very, very important. I know that I've been getting the look, so I've been getting the look. I'll just end here by saying we need to really translate our commitment for coordination into concrete reality. And the civil society has an amazing and crucial role to play, not just here in New York through institutions like CSocD, but at the regional and at the national level. I thank you for your attention.
It's always complicated to speak after you because you have such an energy. Thank you so much for reminding us so many things that is complicated to summarize. But basically, the importance of social dialogue, multilateralism, coordination, and also important to remind us about the metrics that remind the importance of delivering, but also achievement that give hope for an inclusive, sustainable social development. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Our now warmly invite our dear Pamela Morgan, head of Zonka International, to take the floor and share her valuable insight for further enrich our discussion.
Good morning, everyone. I am very pleased to be here. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have to make a correction. I am the UN Committee Chair of Zonta International. And I am quite pleased to be here. Cynthia is someone that no one wants to follow. But I'll do my best. Today I'm going to look at decent work through a gendered lens. Decent work is one of the most powerful determinants of women and girls' futures. It shapes not only income and employment, but dignity, safety, access to justice, and the ability to fully exercise human rights. When women and girls are denied decent work, inequality becomes entrenched across generations, affecting education, health, political participation, freedom from violence generationally. Globally, women remain disproportionately concentrated in informal, undervalued, and insecure work. They face persistent wage gaps, limited access to social protection, discrimination in hiring and advancement, and heightened exposure to harassment and exploitation. Girls encounter these inequalities early through barriers to education, child labor, early marriage, and pathways into safe and sustainable livelihoods. The absence of decent work is therefore not simply an economic issue. It's a social justice failure that undermines gender equality at its core. Decent work, as articulated in international frameworks, is about more than having a job. It includes fair wages, safe working conditions, freedom from violence and discrimination, social protection, and the right to organize. For women and girls, these conditions are foundational to autonomy, resilience, and participation in public life. Without them, commitments to empowerment and equality remain largely rhetorical. That is why civil society engagement, particularly within the United Nations system, is so critical. Zonta International has long recognized that women's economic empowerment and access to decent work are central to achieving gender equality. Through sustained advocacy at the UN, Zonta has elevated labor rights, access to education, and freedom from violence as interconnected human rights priorities, ensuring that they remain visible within global policy spaces. Likewise, NGO CSW New York, the NGO in which I serve as co-chair, plays a vital role in advancing social justice through its engagement with the Commission on the Status of Women. CSW remains one of the UN's most significant accountability mechanisms for gender equality, and NGO CSW New York helps ensure that civil society, particularly grassroots and feminist voices, can meaningfully participate in these processes and hold governments accountable for their commitments. The Doha Declaration is especially relevant in this context because it explicitly references gender, affirming that development, justice, and economic participation cannot be achieved without addressing structural gender inequality. This acknowledgement reinforces a crucial truth. Labor markets, legal systems, and emerging technologies are not gender neutral. Women's access to decent work must be intentionally protected and advanced. NGO CSW New York's Working Group on Social Justice has demonstrated what this intentional approach can look like in practice. One significant example is the working group's research on the impact of artificial intelligence on women's human rights, including implications for employment, access to justice, surveillance, bias, and economic exclusion. As AI increasingly shapes labor markets and decision-making systems, the risk for women, particularly those who are already marginalized, are profound. Importantly, the working group's findings were presented to His Excellency Philemon Yang during his presidency of the General Assembly, illustrating how feminist civil society can bring evidence-based analysis directly into global decision-making spaces. This work highlights the dangers of unregulated and biased technologies while calling for gender-responsive governance, transparency, and accountability. Together, these efforts, Zonta International, NGO CSW New York, and the Working Group on Social Justice, help bridge the gap between global commitments and lived realities. They ensure that frameworks like the Doha Declaration are not merely symbolic, but actionable, that emerging challenges such as AI are addressed through a gender justice lens, and that governments are pressed not only to pledge progress, but to implement and report on it. Ultimately, advancing decent work for women and girls in all their diversity is about shaping a future grounded in dignity, equity, and accountability. It requires sustained civil society leadership, strong multilateral institutions, and the courage to confront both long-standing and emerging forms as inequality. As we look ahead, the call to action is clear. Governments must translate commitments made through CSW, the Doha Declaration, and related UN frameworks into concrete policies, actionable policies that guarantee decent work, social protection, and access to justice for all women and girls, including in emerging areas such as AI. Civil society must continue to generate evidence, elevate lived experience, and demand accountability. And institutions across the UN system must embed gender-responsive approaches across economic, technological, and labor governance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pamela, for bringing so many points on the table once again. Couple of things, the fact that you mentioned that the lack of decent work is a social justice failure, which is very important to remind. Also, the fact that decent work access is not gender neutral, and we need to acknowledge that there is, of course, multiple complications, and we didn't mention it also for women, unfortunately. And thank you so much for bringing some practical aspect as well, and also the fact that we have different commissions at the UN, we may have different purpose, but at the end we all work in solidarity, and we are all interconnected to create that inclusive and better world we are all looking for. I'm delighted to now invite our last but not least panelists, Ms. Paola Simonetti, Director of Equality Department at the International Trade Union Confederation, to deliver her perspective and solutions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to you all. It's an honor to be part of this distinguished panels with distinguished colleagues. So for those who are not aware, the International Trade Union Confederation is the global umbrella of representing workers' voice globally. So we represent 191 million workers in 169 countries, and we have overall around 340 national affiliates all over the world. So, and of course, you know, we are constituents to the International Labour Organization, together with employers, representative, and government. So we have strenuously worked towards, in the lead up to Doha. Trade unions have been very much engaging in this important not only event, but really process around reaffirming commitments since Copenhagen and also reinforcing them in that sense. So we also have a certainly positive take on the outcomes of Doha. As it was underlined, the decent work agenda is very much and strongly enshrined in the Doha Declaration, and of course for us based on key rights and pillars like freedom of association and collective bargaining. Of course, social dialogue is and the role of social partners is of course very much enhanced in the Doha Declaration, and for us of course this is a very much welcome policy and political approach in that sense. Of course, there are others important points that we have welcomed. The living wages, these are, you know, a very important achievement also for to be recognized by the Doha Declaration. This is, again, a pillar nowadays very much important to uphold the livelihoods and the access to decent work for all workers. And again, we also remind that also there is, you know, a tripartite definition on the living wage that has been forged by the International Labour Organization, and we very much, you know, uphold and welcome. The social protection is also a pillar of decent work, and the fact that the commitment of increasing by 2% the social protection cover by year that was actually enshrined in the Sevilla Compromiso in July. It has been translated and carry over in Doha. It's also an important point. And gender equality. Gender equality has been advocated very eloquently just a few seconds before, and for us, the issue of you know, equal pay for work of equal value is of course you know, an integral part to decent work. By the way, SDG 8 on decent work and employment and inclusive growth, it includes a target also in that respect. But also fighting gender-based violence and harassment in the world of work is equally important, and the care economy. So I have only 1 minute, so I will go very, very quickly. I think we think that the Doha Declaration is really an achievement in the sense that it should foster policy coherence across the UN system, across what we call the UN Social Development Agenda, and so linking up CSocD with CSW, with the Financing for Development and the HLPF. And of course, this needs to be trickled down to the national level, and this is why we also try to push our affiliates all over the globe to engage at national level with the UN country systems in order to push forward and translate these commitments in real change at national level, and therefore keeping governments accountable. So for us, we see the Doha outcome really as a booster for accelerating SDGs implementation. And I would much concur with my dear friend Cynthia that the SDGs are the most advanced global agenda that multilateralism has ever delivered. And since we are approaching 2030, we really need to preserve the fundamental achievement of the SDGs agenda and to strengthen that in order not to lag behind and go backwards. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Again, we have a lot of chance to have such amazing panelists today. Thank you so much, Paola. I welcome so many points that you made today, aside from the conclusion that you said beautifully. Your focus on living wage, the mention of social protection as well, which is particularly important when we talk about decent work. And finally, your mention of the eradication of gender-based violence at work, probably the mention of C180, which is particularly important, and a deep success of ILO, by the way, in terms of ratification by the countries. So thank you so much for your intervention. And with the intervention of Paola, we finish our first section of the panel. We will now move to our second section of the panel, interaction from the floor. And similarly with the first panel, we will have intervention followed by answer from our panelists. I am reminding our speakers in this section to limit their intervention to 3 minutes in order to keep on time and to ensure we hear from all of them and have a meaningful exchange after that. To echo my introduction, first of all, as I mentioned, the world is full of grassroots champions who could not have been here with us today. And so that's why we also decided in a matter of inclusivity to also give the opportunity for other people from all over the world to talk at this panel. And I'm very happy to welcome for the first intervention from the floor, the Reverend Father Derek Samuel Kabuki will be speaking from Luka district in Uganda and will be speaking with us by pre-recorded video. Sorry. Thank you so much. And the opportunity to present again our new speaker. So, as we are waiting for the technical issue, we will now welcome Kate Mittelhauser to deliver our remarks.
Okay. Hello, esteemed panelists. My name is Kate Mittelhauser. As a student who grew up in the Silicon Valley, surrounded by technology, and has been in college during the AI boom, I know just how impactful technology can be. Unfortunately, AI, the revolutionary technology of this era, is headed in the direction of increasing inequity. Marginalized communities such as youth, people with disabilities, and people without advanced education are losing their jobs at higher risk of poverty or are falling behind technologically, all of which go against the 3 pillars of social development and the Doha Declaration. Yet, they have little to no say in how AI is being regulated or used. To prevent this immense deviation from the Doha Declaration's goals and ensure decent work for all, we need to give a consistent, formalized voice, and therefore power, to these communities regarding AI. My hope and proposal is to start broadly implementing AI advisory boards. This idea comes from my experience at Northeastern University, where our student government's AI advisory board has guided how the university uses and teaches about AI. Its goal is to ensure that all students are prepared for the changes AI will cause in employment and social inclusion. I believe a similar concept can and should be implemented in a multi-level fashion, from the UN and international institutions all the way to local civil society organizations. Since no one has the same experience with AI, nor a full understanding of its effects or capabilities, leaders should consistently hear diverse perspectives to make properly, equitably informed decisions about regulating AI, integrating it into their plans for the economy, and upskilling or reskilling workers to prepare for its impact. Perspectives should come from both those most at risk for being adversely affected and those who are experts in AI, so that they can give advice on both what can happen and what should happen. Having diverse advisors will help leaders to pursue a variety of sections within the Doha Declaration, including sections 30 and 34, which, among many other goals, call for inclusive, quality skill development and vocational training, especially for at-risk communities like youth, and in regards to technological advancements and the changes technological advancements will bring. Current decisions made on AI will determine if we widen inequality or we are propelled to achieve the Doha Declaration's goals. So I call upon all, please ensure that these decisions are well informed and made equitably through diverse AI advisory. I'll close with a question for the panelists. According to the Doha Declaration, sections 30, 34, and 43H, we need to pursue decent work for all and bridge the digital divide, all while strengthening multi-stakeholder engagement. To achieve these goals effectively, what strategies to actively engage with and incorporate the perspectives of communities most at risk for being harmed by AI can your organizations utilize or can you suggest? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mitteloser, for your question. We'll take another question, this time from this part of the audience, and I would like to call Ms. Gada Khalifa Al-Subahi for your intervention.
Excellencies and panelists, I would like to share a brief field perspective from Qatar Foundation for Social Work and our centers. Across our centers, we see how community-driven programs translate inclusion into real employment and participation pathways. Inclusive employment must cover persons with intellectual disabilities as well as those with physical disabilities. At the Shafallah Center for Persons with Disabilities, the ISHAM initiative supports access to real employment pathways through structured skills development, supported employment, and employer partnerships, with a focus on readiness, workplace adaptation, and sustained inclusion, not only job placement. Also at Shafallah Center and Best Buddies, the ECHO platform serves as a national platform that empowers persons with disabilities, their families, and peers to share their experience and stories in their own voices. Through a human-centered storytelling, a key feature is the mobile wall of opportunities, which travels across public hubs in Qatar and presents CVs of job-seeking persons with disabilities directly to employers, connecting visibility with real access to opportunity. We also see youth and social entrepreneurship playing playing a growing role in addressing complex social challenges. Through Nama Center's social incubator, young people receive structured mentoring and support to turn ideas that solve social problems into practical, impact-driven projects. An example of a cross-center collaboration is Temkeen Junior between Nama Center and Rima Center for Orphans, which builds entrepreneurship and innovation skills for orphans to be active members of the community. We further highlight the role of the valued elderly, as we call them in Qatar, through having social spaces and majlis clubs to engage the valued elderly into continuous learning and intergenerational initiatives and volunteer network. Together, these field models demonstrate how inclusive and decent work can be advanced through practical community-based partnerships. My question to the panelists is, how can international organizations collaborate more effectively to scale inclusive, decent work models and integrate successful community initiatives into mainstream labor systems? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khalifa Al-Subahi, for your question. I would just like to know if the video is working. Yes? Can we make a try? The sound is working. All right. Unfortunately, that will not be a possibility, but this video will be published on the network of the NGO CSocD, so everybody will be able to watch it because this is a testimony that deserves to be heard. We will take a last intervention from the floor, and I saw a very motivated lady on the back, this side, with the white shirt. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Audrey Gheorghe, and I'm delivering this statement on behalf of the McGill Youth Advisory Delegation. There's a common sentiment that new generations don't want to work hard anymore. This idea is often used to explain labor shortages, economic insecurity. However, this framing diverts attention from the real situation. This issue is not whether new generations are willing to work hard anymore, but whether work as it exists today still offers a fulfilling life, and for most people it doesn't. Decent work is not a given nor a guaranteed human right distributed by institutions or governments. The opportunity to engage in these discussions, gain relevant experience, and work towards a fulfilling life is not through what top-down and large-scale institutions give us, but by our own risk-taking. Nowadays, decent work only comes from experience, often unpaid, making it highly exclusive and limited. Access to education is already a struggle, yet the days when a degree guaranteed a steady job is past. Financial inability and the lack of an existing network within a field forces graduates to settle for low-paying, less stable jobs which do not make use of their education. As global markets transform, dominant narratives often blame young generations for not wanting to work hard anymore, while ignoring the structural failures of current economic systems. From your perspectives, I ask the panelists, how can we shift away from profit-driven, laissez-faire economic models towards people-centered, sustainable job creation that guarantees dignity, protection, and collective well-being? Especially, how would youth be able to benefit from this model, and what responsibilities do international organizations, trade unions, and civil society have in redefining what economic prosperity should look like for us? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your intervention, which means a lot to think and a lot to say. For the panelists, we'll get a 3 intervention, unfortunately, for the time to have also answer from our panelists. We had 3 interesting perspectives and questions. Who'd like to start? Go for it.
I'll break the ice. I was inspired by the last question. Thank you very much. So indeed, job creation, decent job creation, this is what the trade unions are calling globally when they speak about and when they promote a new social contract, that we need a new social contract. So we are calling very vibrantly for to redouble the investment and the efforts to create decent jobs. And we don't want any jobs. We want jobs with rights, right? We know that there are key sectors where these jobs can be created. So, for example, sustainable infrastructure, the green, economy, the care economy. Again, the ILO helped us with numbers in that respect, because we know that millions of jobs can be created in the care economy if we increase the investment, at national level. And so public investment is definitely something that it's really fundamental in order to create a decent job. And also we face a very important area where we have to challenge the so-called the global shifts linked to technological transition, to climate transition. So, of course, the concept of just transition for us is fundamental. And this is where, social protection comes into the fore again, to protect workers when they have to move from one job to another, but also the skilling and the reskillings and the access to education, as you have said, which is so fundamental, also to grant access to decent job to young workers and young people. So as a trade union movement, we are trying, to go towards those achievements, towards that direction. And of course, we are negotiating at the workplace also with employers, our counterpart, which, of course, it needs to be clear that it's not only a government responsibility, of course, with public investment, but also a responsibility of employers to, of course, pay their share in financing these skills development initiatives, and to give the opportunity also to young people in particular in that respect. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on two of the questions. Kate's question on AI. I think that institutions can conduct regular compensated consultations with affected communities, that they can partner, institutions can partner with trusted civil society and grassroots organizations as intermediaries to begin to discuss and affect change, put policies in place that can serve both groups. I think that participatory impact assessments can be required. That would require and document gendered, racialized, and socioeconomic risks before deployment. And then I think that institutions can also incorporate feedback mechanisms, community-informed audits, and grievance pathways to ensure that ongoing input after systems are in use. So I think that there is life, even if there is not an advisory board. There are ways to still help communities work in conjunction with institutions. And then with effective collaborations, I think that civil society networks should develop consortia and come together and speak with one voice, a larger voice. The consortia would help them share back office functions and costs. They would meet procurement and reporting requirements. They would be able to engage the governments as a collective rather than small grantees. And in doing that, I believe they would get a better response. And then I think that we need to look at how do we shift relationships between civil society organizations and governments, because at this point they're almost adversarial. So how do we bring them together so that they are able to function as co-collaborators or policy partners? Thank you.
Thank you so much to all those who intervened and to the distinguished colleagues on the panel who have answered all the questions. I'll just highlight a couple of things, bringing the different strands together. One of the things that we need to emphasize, even as civil society, and using the Doha Political Declaration as a good platform, is the importance of skills development and lifelong learning. The lady at the back who was described as being very enthusiastic in white, the way we had our careers, you learn and then you walk. And you usually walk on one track for quite a long time and then you retire. It's no longer going to be like that. And learning how it takes place and the control of learning has changed and will continue to change. The rate of change in the world of work is so dynamic that the ability to learn, unlearn, upskill will be very vital in terms of the career, if we could still call it a career. So in addition to what has been said, that is an important dimension that the ILO is bringing to the table. That learning, skilling, upskilling, reskilling will be crucial through the lifespan, particularly for young people. And that skilling has to be moved from the traditional academic focus to more closely tied to the needs of the individual in terms of what they want to do, as well as the needs of the labor market. And so I want to go to the comment that was made by Qatar Foundation for Social Work. When I talked about my new and old friends, those are part of the new friends that I was referring to. It's really interesting what you're doing. And it aligns with the orientation of the ILO in terms of the integration of different dimensions of interventions required to address the gaps, particularly for those excluded, whether they're people with disabilities, whether they're young people, bringing the social protection dimension with the skills development dimension, putting them together. But there's another dimension that has not come up, and that's the link between the supply and demand of the labor market, public and private employment services. This is major, and it's also been impacted by AI. So the issues that you have raised are also about youth and AI and the need for them to be specifically targeted, and I'll try to do this in 1 minute. In my previous life in Africa, we saw technology as an opportunity to leapfrog, is it leapfrog?
Yeah.
Jumpstart? Whatever.
Jump ahead.
To jump ahead, right? And play catch up. And that's why we came together with ITU to develop a program, and it was very deliberate, a program to promote skills and decent jobs for youth in Africa's digital economy. It was very deliberate. So it's not just skilling. It's getting them engaged in co-creating the program, but also making them creators of work. And also creators and innovators in technology. So they're not just consumers of technology from the global north. Is that enough? No, but it's a reflection, it's a response to the question you've asked, that this is on the agenda. And we need to have more of this, and we need to have young people more engaged, including in the trade unions. That's something that I've always advocated for, that unions, youth have to be attracted to unions, and unions have to be attracted to young people. I'll stop there.
The first thing I wanted to say is wow, wow, wow for the answer of everybody. The second thing I have to say, unfortunately, is that we reached the end of this panel right on time. So we have to close this panel. Something I would like, it will be basically impossible, again, to conclude on everything that has been said so beautifully and by experts on the top of that. But something I would like to remind is the importance to be in the same room and to interact in the same room in equal perspective, because this is how we create the change. Because if we don't have the perspective of everybody, we don't realize that sometimes we speak different language and we have different perspective, and so same solution can become a detail for someone and a mountain for someone else. So it's important to continue to have this space as a civil society forum. Thank you so much to our panelists. And we'll leave the stage, and in 5 minutes, we'll start the conclusion. Please stay with us and stay seated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear friends and colleagues, we're going to get started with our closing panel. We request you take your seats, please. Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. We're going to get started with the closing panel. I'm Cecily Kern. I am the main representative for Mercy International Association, a member of the NGO Committee for Social Development. I also serve as chair of the NGO Committee on Migration, and I will be your moderator. As we gather for this closing session of the Civil Society Forum, we turn our focus on the work ahead, bridging aspiration with action and dialogue with concrete implementation. Today and throughout this week, we have discussed how this session of the Commission for Social Development represents an urgent call to accelerate progress toward the commitments made in Doha and Copenhagen, and toward the Sustainable Development Agenda the global community pledged to achieve by 2030. The world is moving fast, but not always forward. Inequality, instability, and exclusion persist even as our timelines to achieve the 2030 Agenda grow shorter. The Doha Declaration provides a roadmap, but achieving it will require commitment, coordination, and courage from governments and civil society alike. The next 5 years must be defined by measurable action, integrated policymaking, and partnerships that reach beyond traditional silos. Our closing panel reaffirms our collective resolve to implement the Doha Declaration by highlighting real, implemented policies that have tangibly reduced poverty, created decent work, and strengthened social protection. These practices demonstrate how equitable and inclusive approaches rooted in solidarity and cooperation can make social justice not just a theme, but a lived reality. We are joined and honored to be joined by these distinguished speakers who embody the collaboration essential for progress. Mr. Stefano Guerra of the Permanent Mission of Portugal to the United Nations and Vice Chair of the Bureau of the Commission for Social Development, and Ms. Merle Roots, Policy Analyst with the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung. Henry Ramirez Soler, Vice Chair of the NGO Committee for Social Development, was unable to join us in person, but has prepared a video message offering his reflections, and hopefully the technology will cooperate with us. Each of our panelists will share a concrete initiative, evidence that when we align policy, people, and purpose, we can advance social development that is both just and inclusive. These are the coordinated, cross-sectoral approaches the Doha Declaration calls for. As we listen to these examples of what works, let's consider how we can adapt, scale, and replicate these successes and other policies and practices we've heard today in our own contexts. Let's also consider how we can strengthen the partnership between governments and civil society, because social development and social justice can only be achieved together. So, Mr. Guerra, I will begin with you. Portugal has long emphasized social protection and employment as tools for inclusion. What is one policy or initiative from your country's recent experience that really demonstrates how the Doha Declaration can come to life, how social justice can move from commitment to tangible change?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, representatives of civil society, colleagues. Portugal welcomes the opportunity to address this forum of the Commission for Social Development, an integral part of the program of the Commission, and to engage directly with civil society whose daily work is indispensable to advancing social justice. And I am even more pleased to be here as Vice Chair of the current session. The Doha Political Declaration on Social Development reflects a shared commitment to dignity, inclusion, and equality. Yet, for many people, these commitments remain distant from lived reality. The most urgent challenges before us, therefore, is implementation. transforming political promises into concrete change. From my national perspective, this means ensuring that the principles of the Doha Declaration are translated into coherent, well-resourced national policies supported by legislation, adequate financing, and clear mechanisms for monitoring progress. Civil society organizations play a central role in bridging the gap between policy and people. In Portugal, organizations such as Caritas Portuguesa, Banco Alimentar contra a Fome, and the European Anti-Poverty Network through its Portuguese branch work every day to combat poverty, food insecurity, and social exclusion. Their experience, your experiences, demonstrates that social justice is not achieved through isolated measures, but through sustained community-based action. Similarly, organizations supporting persons with disabilities, older persons, and families at risk provide essential services while also contributing valuable insights into the structural barriers that perpetuate inequalities. These organizations do not simply deliver assistance. They strengthen social cohesion, promote inclusion, and hold institutions accountable. We believe that civil society must be recognized as a full partner in social development, involved not only in implementation, but also in the design, evaluation, and improvement of public policies. Your on-the-ground knowledge is essential for ensuring that policies respond to real needs and leave no one behind. Inclusive economic policies, those that promote decent work, fair wages, and strong labor protections, must go hand in hand with robust social protection systems, particularly for those most exposed to poverty and exclusion. Civil society actors are key allies in ensuring these systems reach those who need them most. Madam Moderator, for the Doha Declaration to become social justice in practice, this Commission must continue to serve as a space for dialogue and shared learning, with civil society fully engaged and meaningfully heard. Portugal, not only as Vice Chair of the Commission, remains committed to working closely with Member States, UN entities, and civil society partners to ensure that our collective commitments result in tangible and lasting improvements in people's lives. Social justice will not be achieved by governments alone. It will be built through partnership, trust, and shared responsibility, with civil society as a driving force in shaping policies that respond to real lives and real needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guerra, for sharing those examples and for your leadership. You've really demonstrated how coherence across ministries, strong institutional and financial support, and cooperation and partnership with civil society can turn equity and inclusion into real measurable results. Ms. Roots, turning to you. The Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung has been advancing cooperation and capacity building across regions. How can initiatives like yours move the Doha commitments off the page and into implementations, and what lessons do they hold for more inclusive global partnerships?
Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, first of all, congratulations, you've all made it to the closing panel. No, but in all seriousness, let me begin by thanking the NGO Committee for Social Development for convening the Civil Society Forum once again and for sustaining this space and the partnership over so many years. I think we heard from Alexia before how important it is that we get together in the same room and talk. I mean, it's also nice to talk via Zoom, but talk person to person. And so the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung has been very proud to support the Civil Society Forum for a long time, based on a very simple conviction that civil society participation is not optional, but essential to a legitimate and effective multilateral system. And I think, I'm not sure whether the ILO special representative to the UN is still here, but she mentioned that multilateralism does deliver, and I think it does deliver if those conditions are met. After today's rich discussions on poverty eradication, decent work, social protection, homelessness, and policy coordination, the guiding question for this closed panel, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating it again, is what concrete measures are now most urgently needed to move the Doha Declaration
from commitment to social justice in practice. So from our perspective, the most urgent step is to institutionalize and protect meaningful civic participation and social dialogue as a core implementation pillar of the Doha Declaration. Without this, even the strongest political commitments risk remaining aspirational. The Copenhagen Declaration, as you all know, placed people at the center of sustainable development. The Doha Political Declaration builds on this foundation, but today the central challenge is no longer agreeing on principles, it is closing the growing gap between pledges and delivery. So with this in mind, Magdalena Sepulveda, the director of the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, called for brave political action in Doha and by saying what we need now is that states are going to take the political will to implement the Doha Declaration in a swift manner with bold measures. So this year's CSocD priority, advancing social development and social justice through coordinated, equitable, and inclusive policies, reflects exactly this shift towards implementation. And implementation requires participation. So progress on poverty eradication, decent work, and social inclusion depends on whether people can actually organize, participate, and influence policy. So you cannot fight poverty effectively if those affected cannot organize. And I think we heard from Marian Broxton that very specifically in the first panel this morning. You cannot deliver decent work without strong workers and trade union representation. And you cannot design inclusive social protection without the participation of those currently excluded. So the Doha Declaration rightly emphasizes the need for coordinated multilateral action. No country or state can tackle inequality, employment, or social protection alone. At Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, the new North-South Futures Forum is one concrete way we are contributing to turning this coordination into implementation. Last December, around 30 policymakers, civil society leaders, trade union representatives, and UN directors, Magdalena Sepulveda being one of them, from the global South and North came together in New York for the first time. These are long-standing partners of FES through our network of over 100 country offices worldwide. The goal was not another conference, but to create a lasting network that jointly identifies where multilateralism is failing on social justice and where progressive coalitions can realistically drive change in a multipolar world. One tangible outcome was a collective mapping of priority challenges and opportunities for progressive multilateralism, including on inequality reduction, climate governance, and structural reforms to global finance, debt, and taxes. We will meet again in June in Brazil to continue working on these very specific issues, so watch out for publications that will also be published in the run-up to June in the meantime. A key learning from the process has also been the growing role of middle powers, which are increasingly shaping outcomes through issue-based, cross-regional coalitions, often acting as bridges between the global South and North, East and West. This directly supports Doha's emphasis on coordinated action and inclusive policymaking and helps translate its multiple resolutions into concrete political momentum across different and multiple policy areas. So as we move forward, the focus must now shift, as many said today, to implementation, follow-up, and mutual accountability across governments, international institutions, and civil society. Civic participation and platforms like the North-South Futures Forum and today's Civil Society Forum can help ensure that Doha becomes a living agenda rather than a negotiated text. So in short, the Doha Declaration will become practice, social justice in practice, when strong participation, coordinated coalitions, and shared accountability drive its implementation, truly placing people at the center of development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for underlining the power of collaboration and mutual learning across regions and across borders. A reminder that no single actor can achieve social justice alone. This is a message we've heard again and again. Together, both of your insights reaffirm that policy innovation and partnerships go hand in hand, and that our progress will depend on how well we sustain these collaborations beyond the Commission. Once again, sincere thanks to both of you for your valuable insights. Your reflections show that by connecting strong institutions, shared capacity, and partnership, we can begin to dismantle the structural inequalities that still hinder inclusive development. And as we reflect on these examples, I hope we'll carry forward the spirit of practical partnership, of learning from one another, and centering the voices of those too often left out, so that our shared vision of social justice becomes action on the ground that makes a real difference in people's lives. And now, hopefully, we'll play the video prepared by Henry Ramirez Soler, the Vice Chair of the NGO Committee for Social Development. Thank you.
Distinguished representative of member states, colleagues from the NGO Committee on Social Development, dear friends. As we close this civil society forum, we wish to underscore a central message. The real challenge today is no longer the formulation of commitments, but their effective implementation and sustained following up. The Doha Declaration represents a decisive step in renewing the global commitment to social development. It will open and update the spirit of the Copenhagen Declaration, reaffirming three fundamental pillars: the eradication of poverty, decent work, and sustainable livelihood, and the construction of the inclusive and cohesive society. However, these commitments will only be meaningful if they are translated into concrete public policies, supported by clear mechanisms for the implementation, monitoring, and accountability. We wish to highlight three urgent calls to action. First, it is essential to move from political declaration to national and local implementation plans, aligned with Doha, with clear targets, measurable indicators, and verifiable timelines, coherence between economic, social, and environmental policies in critical avoid fragmented response. Second, monitoring and evaluation mechanism must be strengthened through transparency and disaggregate data system, enabling the measure of real progress in poverty reduction, decent employment, social protection, and inclusion. Without following up, three is not credible. Without data, three is not social justice. Third, civil society must be recognized not merely as an observer, but as a strategic partner in implementation and accountability. Community-based organizations, social movements, and territorial networks bring evidence, innovation, and social legitimacy that a state cannot replace. In a global context, marked by multiple crises, economic, social, climate, governance, and by a growing disagreement for the multilateral agreements aimed at the common good. Social justice is not a political option, but a condition for peace, stability, and human dignity. From this forum, we reaffirm our readiness to actively collaborate with member states, the United Nations system, and the right holders, so that the Doha Declaration doesn't remain on paper, but become a living roadmap with real impact on people's life. Closing this forum meaning opening a new era of shared responsibility. Civil society, social movements, and communities are ready. It's time to strengthen a multilateralism that respects the sovereignty of people and genuinely seek for the common good. We true that the mechanism for the implementation and following up will rise to the level of the commitments made. Thank you very much.
We're very grateful to Henry for sending in his closing remarks and a very clear call to action, and regret that he couldn't be here with us to deliver them himself. Henry reminds us of civil society's indispensable role as both advocate and implementer. His message is a powerful reminder that our success depends on listening to those we serve and renewing our commitment to inclusive coordination at every step. And as we conclude this discussion, I just want to add my voice to others and reflect on the indispensable role of civil society at the United Nations, particularly the value of spaces like this Civil Society Forum. These spaces are not symbolic, they are essential to the credibility and effectiveness of the multilateral system itself. Civil society brings both ambition and practicality to UN discussions. We bring people's lived realities, their challenges, innovations, and hopes into decision-making spaces that shape global agendas and commitments. We are partners in implementing evidence-based practices that reach those most often left behind. We monitor, evaluate, and report. We connect communities. We share knowledge across vast networks and hold the international community to account for its promises. Yet, as we look ahead to processes such as the upcoming Commission on the Status of Women or the International Migration Review Forum in May, we must recognize that participation remains a privilege not equally shared. Many, like our colleague Henry, will be unable to access this space, whether due to visa restrictions or fear of retribution for defending the human rights and fundamental freedoms of people who have been excluded, discriminated against, or criminalized. Their absence is not just a loss for civil society, it's a loss for all of us and a disservice to the multilateral process. At a time of rising polarization, as even limited spaces for civil society engagement are narrowing, it's more critical than ever to protect and expand them. The Civil Society Forum stands as a model, a practice that makes our collective work more inclusive, more responsive, and ultimately more effective. And so, as we carry the Doha Declaration beyond these walls, let us remember that its promise takes root not in resolutions, but in our relationships, in partnerships, communities, and movements that give life to its words. If we are to advance social development and social justice, our partnership must be anchored in mutual trust, shared responsibility, and recognition that the voices of civil society are not peripheral. They are the grounding force that keeps multilateralism connected to human reality. And again, recalling Marianne Broxton's powerful contribution to the first panel, every policy we shape, every commitment we renew must find its meaning in the lives of real people. Civil society ensures that it does. That is where our work continues, and that is where its impact will endure. And with that, I'd like to close out the final panel of the Civil Society Forum and hand the floor to Jillian. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who made the time and chose to spend their Friday morning here with us. And so while we'll be taking pictures of the panelists, it's only fair that we all take a picture together. So I invite everybody to come on this side of the stage so we can get a group photo of everyone who took time to come here this Friday morning. Thank you.